Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. With your host, Linnea Hubbard. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
I'm Linnea Hubbard, and today is Saturday, April 29th, 2023. I had the absolute pleasure of chatting with volunteer combat medic Brandon Mitchell on Tuesday, and honestly, he had so many interesting things to say, I hated to trim it down to a single episode. So I didn't. Today's episode is part 1. Part 2 will be out sometime next week. Who are you?
Who am I?
Yeah.
So my name is Brandon Mitchell, and to sum it up, I film really weird things and I put them on YouTube and Instagram, and I take the proceeds in the process of documenting my life, and I spend them on the armed forces of Ukraine. I'm not an Azovstal defender. I'm not a HIMAR operator. I'm actually a medic. But yeah, a couple months into the war, I started social media. I started documenting it to fundraise.
What took you to Ukraine? Did you have connections to Ukraine before the large-scale invasion?
I have none. I've been an avid boxing fan my whole life, and the Ukrainians I followed a lot of Ukrainian fighters through their career. And I did date a Ukrainian girl once for like 4 months, many years ago. Nothing else. Didn't know anyone in Ukraine.
So what made you want to go volunteer?
Well, I live here in Sweden. I've lived in Europe most of my adult life, in the UK and here. When I moved to Sweden, it was only a couple of years ago. A couple of years before the war. I worked really hard to integrate, to learn the language, and then I found a job after my first year. I passed a Swedish job interview, but the company was actually from Estonia. Okay, so I became a stone worker, which is a very popular trade in Estonia. And I went to the factory. I went to Tallinn, and I trained there for 5 weeks, and I learned my first trade. When I traveled around in Estonia, I was always intrigued by Russia, and I went to the border in Narva, and there's a beautiful castle and there's a river, but there's a real feeling. I don't know if you know, in Europe, the EU, you can go to another country and not even think about it, but there was a real feeling of not welcomed. Do you know, like they had barriers, they had Constantina razor wire everywhere. You could see guys on the other side. And I thought, Russia probably leaves a pretty big impression on Estonia. You know, such a small country next to the largest country in the world. But other than that, there was also 30 Ukrainians employed in the factory. You know, so I got to meet some of them. That was a factor. That was a big factor, that I had friends from Estonia, friends that I could tell you their names, I could tell you their wife's names, their kid, a little bit, you know. I could put a face on the problem. And I also have many friends from Poland, through boxing my whole life in England. So I thought, wow, they'll run through Ukraine and then Poland will be next. And that was my motivation, that well, we're going to have to do this someday. And I don't have any children, and a lot of my friends have children. That was it in a nutshell. I didn't want my friends to get hurt, but I could put faces to the problem. Do you understand? Like, in my own imagination, not that I knew the Ukrainians that well, but I seen something wider, and I ate dinner with those people who I thought would be affected.
Now, you have military experience, right? You served in the UK? Is that right?
So I grew up in Canada, and I joined the Army Reserves when I was a kid. I suppose if you're American, maybe it's like the National Guard, like a part-time soldier. And I did that from high school, and I quit school when you could still do it, and join the Army full-time. and then that led to the UK. Now, over 4.5 years between both armies, I thought, what an opportunity to transfer to the British Army from Canada, because you could do that. A Commonwealth nation, Australians could do it, even people from Jamaica. The captain who recruited me was from South Africa. That was fascinating, for a young boy. And I took a leap of faith. Yeah. But unfortunately, I joined the army as a bad boy. I had a lot of bad habits. I got into a lot of trouble. And where I come from, if you don't go to university right away and if you don't have a plan, you can sell drugs or you can join the army. And I did both. Eventually, it caught up with me. I got into a bit of trouble in the army, particularly with drink and a bit of drugs. And I was 21 years old. I joined at 17. And at 21 years old, I had the option, should I stay or should I go? And that wasn't given to a lot of people. But I left the army. And if I'm honest with you, for many years, from 21 to probably till about 27, I really regretted that. But that's my shining career. No Iraq, no Afghanistan. Spent some time in Northern Ireland. But no, I didn't come to Ukraine with great military purpose.
Did any of that experience prepare you for what you would encounter in Ukraine?
A lot of things. What we call actions on contact drills for encountering Russians. I've not encountered that many, but I have a few. But the biggest thing that prepared me for Ukraine wasn't anything to do with military. It was a bit of age. At 25 years old, I quit drinking. I joined a 12-step fellowship. I quit all drink and drugs, and a 12-step fellowship. There's a lot of introspection. Maybe life doesn't suck. Maybe you suck, Brandon. Maybe we should look at that. And there was a lot of development of interpersonal relationships. That's what prepared me. 11 years I settled in Bakhmut, Ivanivsky, which is a village just outside of it. I celebrated 11 years clean and sober off all drugs and alcohol on New Year's. But no, people are people anywhere you go in the world, and that's what prepared me. Like I guess people would say, like my grandmother, you're growing up now, but no. I had to do something to grow up.
Why did you decide to be a medic?
Well, it just so happened. I went to Ukraine from Sweden. There was a lot of people. The embassy put us in these chat groups. Okay, it was called Signal. I didn't know what the hell that was. But they're like, oh, it's like WhatsApp. You like it. But there was about 150 of us in this one. And at the end of it, only 5 of us went to Ukraine. 2 of them were medics. 2 of them were quite high-level medics. One had become a nurse in civilian life after the army. And I didn't know what to do, but 5 of us, we all agreed from Sweden. They were all Swedes, ethnic Swedes. And then there was me. We agreed to meet in Krakow. And what would we do? We don't know. Nobody knew. But I had a Canadian contact in Lviv. So that was something that, we'll get to Lviv and we'll figure it out from there. And this is early to mid-March, right? There wasn't a lot of information about anything. Just the idea of World War III. But we got to Lviv and I had no social media for a couple of years. I'd thrown it all out. But one of the boys, he actually just quit the police force to come, and which was kind of cool. He met someone on Instagram, and this man on Instagram said he was Canadian. Would you like to join Hospitallers Medical Battalion? And they're like, yeah, let's go do that. They're rocking and rolling in Kiev and Bucha and Irpin. And I thought to myself, well, I could go with them, but I don't want to get anyone killed because of my lack of combat skills. Like I thought there was all these guys coming through, all these like hardcore guys, you know what I mean? Like I was in Iraq, Afghanistan, I did this. I didn't know that most of them were lying. It attracted some real interesting people at the first, but I wasn't an underwater knife fighter like all of them. So I said, well, I'll try this humanitarian stuff. The Swedes went off. I did some convoys to Kharkiv, but I said this humanitarian thing isn't really for me, and there's too many personalities involved. The army, that would be good. That would be good. I think I'll take my chances. And I said, I rang up one of the Swedes. I said, can I join Hospitallers? And he said, yeah, I think we can get you in. And I said, okay, well, I'll go to Kiev. And I took a train to Kiev, and it was really scary. It's like, oh my God, you're going to Kiev. But I already been to Kharkiv. I chose that because that's as far as I could go. But I mean, Kiev was going to fall, and we were all going to be. I said, I'll do it. And when I showed up the next day, I met two of the Swedes, and I met Oleg. And Oleg said to me, yes, the Swedish guys tell me good things about you. And what will you do here at our battalion? And I said, I think I'll be a driver. I can drive an ambulance. I've driven a work van for years. I was in the exhibition industry. You have to drive really fast in big vehicles to get places from time to time every day. And he said, we don't have any driver positions, but a gunner position has just come available. And I was thinking, what does that mean? It just became available. So I said, yeah, okay, I'll do that. I'll do that. And then I ended up in a medical battalion, but I have no medical background, you see. So how does that work? Well, these guys from center of Kiev were running for 2 days, 3 days to Bucha, to Irpin. You could hear it all in the background, and sometimes things would hit pretty close to us. But there was courses going on in the basement, kind of like a bunker of a church. And Ukrainians were on the ground, like sitting in circles with Ukrainian instructors, teaching them everything from IVs to, it was really surreal, like you'd go to jail for this stuff in like the Western world, malpractice, right? But there was an American nurse from Colorado, Rebecca, and she's one of the best friends I have in my life. She was a trauma nurse, and she's fantastic. And her and a French doctor, they decided to start a training syllabus in English for paramedics, for any role that you would have. And they started a 10-day course for 12 hours a day. My second day, I was attempting IV lines, and to this big, yeah, and I was scared. And they're like, "No, you're gonna learn." And that was okay, but until I drew blood on Rebecca, she gladly gave her arms out to many students. She bled for Ukraine, but they trained us. They trained us. They trained us. They trained us. It had to be over 10 days, 12 hours a day. I was exhausted, but that wasn't unique. That was happening all over the country. That was yeah. That's how I ended up in a medical battalion, and it was very hard, and it was very fast.
What has been really challenging for you in this?
There's different things in different parts, different aspects of the war. I didn't understand this when I first came here. I don't know what your imagination was like, but I thought that all of Ukraine was just going all the time, and it was life or death, whether you were in Kharkiv or Lviv. I didn't know. If medics were working all day long, everybody'd be dead. It's a fact. See, what we do, we send out teams of 4, teams of 7, teams of 2, to do different medical roles. Now they work in hospitals. We'll have an ambulance crew. We'll have 4-wheel drive Kazovac vehicles very close to the front. And sometimes you can wait. I know people who've done 1 month rotations where they haven't seen one casualty. That's a good thing. I say the biggest challenge, it's like you're waiting for days. Sometimes you're waiting for, I've waited, I've gone 3 weeks, the longest, without a casualty. But it's not convenient when it starts. I don't know how else to say it. It's the most inconvenient thing, because maybe there's going to be an attack on the Ukrainian side. So we know about that. We know to prepare. More medics come. But maybe it's an attack on the Russian side. Maybe there's an accident. And it's very, very hard. I don't care who you are, when you've had nothing for like 5 days, a week, 2 weeks, and all of a sudden you've got 20. That's the hardest thing, like on the face of it. There's one time I was in there was a battle in Zaporizhzhia Oblast in my first 2 months of the war, but we got told in advance, maybe about 18 hours before the attack. You know, they don't tell everyone, but they told the medics to prepare and to report. For 3 days, it was personally the bloodiest work I'd ever done. But it was easy. It was easy because we were part of a team of doctors, surgeons, anesthesiologists, and the flow was steady. You know, people would come, and there was a routine. I have nothing to compare to because I'm not a civilian paramedic. But I would imagine if you were in a busy city, especially in America, like a big city, you would go do a 12-hour shift and you would expect things are going to happen, you know. But that's really hard. You know, sometimes we have nothing for 2 days, 5 days, 10 days, and then it just starts so suddenly. Yeah.
What do you do while you're waiting?
Well, I must admit, it's a lot easier now that we have what's called Starlink. Starlink internet. But before, like on a personal level, I remember my first couple rotations, I was the only foreigner. So there might be one other English speaker, maybe, you know, 2 other English speakers. I made friends with the animals, you know, because we live in rural areas. There a lot of people abandoned their dogs and cats. The army took care of them, or I would study. I would try to learn more things. If I was lucky, I'd get half a 3G signal on my phone. It takes a while to load, but YouTube's actually quite a friendly app when you have, like, compared to say Instagram or social media, when you have limited signal. I watched a lot of medical videos. That's what I did. Yeah. And I tried to learn a lot of new things, self-taught. Later on in the war, I had a social media. It was 2 months into the war, I started an Instagram to fundraise. You want to go further into it, I started a YouTube, and that is a lot of work. YouTube is so much work. To edit a film, that can take hours. That can take, and I have to put it away, and I have to look at it another day with fresh eyes. Just because I know what's going on in the video doesn't mean you do. And I'm no professional, but I've been quite successful with YouTube fundraising. So if I can say so, when I'm waiting a lot, it doesn't feel so brave or heroic. But on med points, a lot of times I'm just sitting in a corner and I edit everything on my phone. And that's waiting for work. Yeah, just waiting, always waiting. It's a weird war. It's a really weird war. It's not what I expected.
What kind of casualties are you seeing? Like, has it changed from early 2022 till now?
No, in principle, it's all the same. There's very few bullet wounds, which I would have thought in war. Most of it comes from the artillery. If they have even the lightest of shrapnel, more often than not, and I don't want to guess and say like 51% or 70%, it's up high in the body, or the arms, because they're in a trench. Okay, so if they were up a bit too high, that's very common. The biggest difference for us, because Ukraine in general stopped putting medics on zero line. Most medics are about 2 kilometers back, maybe 1 kilometer back. The work is better on that the soldiers are being taught. They're being taught tactical combat casualty care. So, for example, if it's as simple as a tourniquet, everybody knows what a tourniquet is now who follows Ukraine, who didn't know before. They tend to be applied well. Okay, the blood has stopped. The bandages, the pressure bandages tend to be done really, really well. So if it's simple and it's an extremity wound, the leg, the arm, more often than not, 70% of the time, if that's all it is, all we've got to do is drive them out, which is a good thing. That's a really good thing, you know. It gets a bit more complicated if they have internal wounds. Okay, if they have an hemothorax, that means air actually coming into the chest cavity. We're still trying to teach soldiers more and more to search the body, you know, to identify those things, because those problems develop. They might be fine now, but 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour later, they can die, and it can turn quite quick. The care is, I'm just talking from the medical point of view, it's improving from point of injury. It's so much better. I don't know when that happened, but I noticed by like October once. I was like in Soledar and Bakhmut. I said, well, it's pretty good here. Like that, their brigade obviously had really, really good training. The biggest issue for us, of course, is the concussions. That's not talked about a lot anywhere, I don't think. But Ukrainians take really good care of their soldiers when you've had a traumatic brain injury of a sort. My last night work, we waited for 3 hours for, well, we had nothing. We had nothing for 3 hours. I had one 200, one that was dead, just struck him off. And then we waited for 3 hours. One man had lost his eye, but he was stable. And there was 11 concussions for our area of responsibility. So, and varying degrees. They're like they're drunk. Mm-hmm. You got to get the gun off them, and you got to talk to them and persuade them. But I don't know what the ratio is to amputations, to traumatic wounds, to concussions, but it's really quite high. And many guys in Ukraine, it's kind of like I don't know what else to call it. I think in America they call it a pissing contest against men. You know, it's an ego thing. One guy says, well, I had 2 concussions. Another guy's like, well, I had 4. And the other guy's like, oh, I had 10. It's a real matter of pride. I suffered a traumatic brain injury. I drove over 2 anti-personnel mines in August, and I lost a lot of my hearing in my right side, and I spent a month in hospital. And it sounds a bit silly, but it's a bit of pride for me too, that I would come back to work, and any of the boys that I work with that know that, the Ukrainian boys, my stock went up big time, you know, because a lot of them thought, oh, the foreigners, you know, they get the best of everything, they get held back and protected. But it's really quite a serious matter. I don't know what's going to happen after the war when we start addressing mental health, other issues. But this concussion issue is going to be very, very serious for the long term effects.
Do you see yourself staying in Ukraine and continuing to volunteer after the war?
Yes. I think about this every day. I had a very good life in Sweden before the war. I've come home to sort out some issues. The government's not been too happy with me being away for so long. I'm not a citizen. I'm a resident. But I'll go back in about a month, depending on them. I want to stay in Ukraine as long as it takes. Now that's a bold statement, but we'll do 1 year at a time. What I really want to do, and I've been inspired by a friend of mine who's a volunteer in Ukraine. He's just gone to Kosovo and he's studying an EOD, Explosives Ordnance Disposal course. And apparently, this is one of the best courses you can take. It's considered a humanitarian EOD course because this work is done all over the world, disposing of mines. And he starts that course next week. I helped him fundraise with it through my YouTube. There will be things to dispose of in Ukraine, I think, for 100 years, they say. This work can't be done in winter when the ground's frozen. So, whatever happens at the very little, like I could come back to Ukraine every summer. I like to. That's what I'm thinking in the back of my head. That would be a nice thing to come for a couple months every year into my old age. I've been affected by mines. I have friends who've been killed by mines, medics evacuating. And a mine doesn't care whether you're Russian or Ukrainian, if you're a child, if you're my dog. Yeah, that's what I'd like to do. I don't know. I don't think I want to stay in Ukraine permanently, but anybody who wants to do that work can train and do for under $10,000. You can get the basic course, and away you go.
What kind of stuff are you fundraising for, or have you been fundraising for?
So I first started Instagram 2 months into the war, but there was a YouTuber that I liked. He was a bit of a travel blogger, and I knew he lived in Kiev. So I wrote him. He was the second person who donated to me. He donated $2,000. Okay, so a stranger. We become friends, but I lucked out. My first fundraiser, it was supposed to be for helmets, but it turned into four-wheel drives. Not one, but two. Okay, in my first 2 months of fundraising, month and a half, I got enough money to go to Germany, to go to Poland, but to get two four-wheel drives from Germany. And then the next thing I came back with was a diesel generator. Because on the medical point I worked, my first medical point, we call them stabilizations. You're in a rural village, there's no power. Medical points need power. And they had this old antique generator, but I bought a brand new one for them. I used my credit card for that. I don't advise that. But working on a medical stabilization, I probably worked solely on medical stabilizations for cumulatively about 3 months in the war. Like just solely that, not going in an ambulance or a Casevac vehicle. And power was the basis to everything. So once I made good on my first fundraiser on Instagram, people started to trust me, I think, I hope, but more money kept coming. Now for me, I don't know what people see in me, but I've seen many volunteers have to go home for one reason or another. And many people I know, from organizations to individuals, I see their funding going down and down. I shouldn't be too brave, or confident, but that's the contrary for me. Every month I get a little bit more money than I did the month before. So one diesel generator, it's now turned into over 100. Now in dollar terms, that's between $1,500 and $2,000. It has to be diesel because that's our fuel source, especially in isolated areas and close to the front. You can't get petrol, gasoline. Some units will kindly, they say that everyone in Ukraine is corrupt and they'll just take. Many people will refuse a gasoline generator from me, despite what they're worth, because they have nothing to fuel it with. Generators turned into radios, Motorola's. Those can cost about $500 for the ones we need. And that's been well over 100 now. A lot of things like I fundraise for is tires for people. Not so often, but I probably bought no less than about 30 tires. We go through tires like crazy. 1 week, I've had 5 flat tires in 1 week. I know people who've had more. I once went 3 months without a flat tire. I guess I wasn't doing anything. War's a total waste of money. It's a total waste of money. I don't want to discourage people from supporting us, but I paid for personally myself 3 vehicles. I've had 2 donated to me. 2 of those vehicles have been destroyed now. so we're lucky. I know people, Ukrainian boys who've been through, they're on their fourth four-wheel drive for the war, yet they're still alive. Tires, radios. I buy a lot of food. Recently, I've decided to take a more proactive role with my fundraising. I started buying night vision binoculars, and I started buying thermal scopes for rifles, heat-seeking scopes. Everything happens at night. All my friends, except one, have personally been killed at night, whether that be by artillery, they've been shot, car accidents. Do you know how many people have died in car accidents in this war? One of my best friends that I came here with from Sweden, he died in December because you can't drive with the lights on, and a tank came, and it was a Ukrainian tank, came out of the field. But with night vision, it's not cheap, but the minimum, about $3,000, I'm able to drive with those that I bought around about 30 miles an hour with comfort. There's better sets if you want to spend an extra 500 to 1,000. You can drive 50 miles an hour with comfort and see every bump on the road. The first night I gave 2 sets out. I only had 3 to an M113. I had to deliver it. That's an armored carrier. And they asked for them pretty quick. And I brought them out to the point for our team. The driver thought it was amazing. Evacuated 3 Ukrainian boys, and the machine gunner killed 3 Russians with one of your 50 cals. So we were up 6 on the first night. On the first night, that's the return we got for about $5,000-6,000. It was €5,000 for those 2 sets. More often than not, that's what they're asking for. I'm lucky enough to have such a platform that I could fundraise for those things. I also promote other volunteers that I've worked with. But if I don't know them and I don't respect them, I won't. So I used to work in civilian evacuation work. I've done a lot of that. Maybe I became famous for that, like on the internet. But in the month of January, between Soledar and Bakhmut, 10 foreigners were killed, and they were either humanitarian workers or civilian evacuators. There were some Ukrainians killed too, but that doesn't make the news because they're Ukrainian. Sorry, I'm cynical. I know other volunteers. If I say support them, like Harley, he got his EOD course paid for. It took a while, but if there's someone else I see doing good work, it's not then what you call a zero-sum game, because they get support and I get more support. I don't know how that works. So those are what I fundraise for. I fundraise for my own efforts, but there's probably about, I'd say seven independent volunteers that I've been lucky enough with, because I have only 2 of us that I know have a really big platform. And me and this one gentleman have talked about this after one of our friends died in Soledar, a humanitarian worker, and him and I have more funding, and we weren't kind of involved with the death. I said, we could have done more to help him, like in the past. I'm just being honest. So I've decided to be more supportive of volunteers, and so is he, of other volunteers. There's only so many effective people here in Ukraine that have stayed, local and foreign. The rest are all gone, but most of the ones that are here are highly effective people. Sorry, long answer. I just went on about it.
How did you go from having no social media to, within a few months, being able to raise, I don't know, how much money on the internet?
I have to do another financial account. I did one in October, and everyone really liked that. I'd say we're around $300,000 to $350,000. But then I get a lot of free things too. Like I've only ever paid for one drug ever, for like €1,000. I wanted to order it just to see if I could get it. But all the medical comes free. So When I started Instagram, I'll tell you a secret. Um, when people would start to follow me, I had no content because it's I won't film anything or upload anything that I'm not allowed to. Like there's rules over here. A lot of people don't follow them. Okay. I won't film casualties. So all I had was cats and dogs. So I'd film the cats and dogs with the timing of the shelling because I noticed Instagram analytics. If I showed a cat or a dog, people would watch for longer. So I was basically playing on people's emotions. I'm a very bad person like that. But what happened around that time, and I started for a couple of months volunteering with civilian evacuation work, and there was no restrictions on what we could film. There's no law denying. So I had explosions and flames and grandmothers, babushkas, and dogs and cats and and then all of a sudden, like some of the videos that get viewed 60,000 times, 100,000 times, and then some people were donating $100, $500, individual people. Like I was a nobody, and I think like I got like $2,000 one day in donations. But this was all I just wanted to buy 10 diesel generators for winter. I thought that would be a good idea. Um, but I always keep the camera rolling. And when I got blown up in a minefield, and you see a big yellow ball of flame and my truck blows up, that was the best thing I ever did for Ukraine. That was on the news in my home country, everywhere. People offered to buy the rights to it. And then I was in hospital for a month. And then Ukrainian news wanted to do a story on me. And terrestrial TV is still the same as in America. In Ukraine, only old people watch it now. So a lot of grandmothers in Ukraine know who I am. Yeah, because I was rescuing grandmothers in Donbass. But it just went from strength to strength. And the more things I bought, if I proved what I bought and what I used it, I would even do monologues on YouTube. Like, well, I'm thinking about buying this. I'm thinking about buying this, but I'd start explaining to people like the practical considerations. Not everybody was watching those videos, but there was about 5, 10,000 people that hung on to every word, and they're like, well, that makes sense. And if I can say to finish on this, I've learned more about the whole war is about human nature, but I've learned a lot more about human nature from the YouTube comments because they're well thought out and constructed. And people would offer me unsolicited advice. 80% of it, okay, 60%, 60% of it was absolutely moronic. Then somewhere along the way, there was really good advice, the rest of it, but only maybe 30% of it was applicable to our life in ways that I couldn't explain to you. But obviously, probably about 10% of the advice I get from the YouTube comments, I've actually been able to like implement it. Like practical things like, Brandon, you should go buy this because you can change tires quicker. And I'm like, so I'll Google it, and it's like now under fire, I can change tires in like 2 minutes as opposed to 8 minutes. There's a lot of dad advice there. I used to film because I don't know anything about the internet with a camera like this. It's great for Instagram. But then someone in my YouTube comment says, can you film in landscape or portrait, whatever, like this? It looks horrible on my 4K TV in Florida. And I was thinking, you bastard, like two people died today. Oh, and after about a day, I read the comments again, and I got over my own emotion. He just told me how to be successful on YouTube. Like they're telling you what they want. And then my viewers, as simple as that, because I don't know anything about tech, then my viewings doubled, my subscribers doubled. So that's what I mean when it's a weird war. It's a weird, weird war because I would say over 50% of us, Ukrainian or foreigner, are on social media one form or another. And if you don't have good social media, you don't get support. But I just make silly videos and laugh at myself because if you take yourself too serious, you're gonna go mental in the head. If you're not laughing, yeah, no, we have some pretty funny times. One time I went I went to Pro and someone said, "Can you buy boots? How many pairs of boots? 10 pairs of boots. What sizes?" So I went to an army surplus shop. They give a great discount for the army, and one pair came back with it was two left feet, two left boots. So I said, "Okay, well, no problem. We'll just go to Bakhmut and we'll find a 300, a wounded. We'll find two guys that are missing the right leg, but we just got to find the right. That's not hard, but the size might be a bit tricky." And God, a lot of my jokes don't translate in Ukrainian, but the doctor thought that one was funny enough. I don't know whatever happened with those boots, by the way. I don't know if that ever came true. We have a lot of laughs.
What are some of the best times, like the best experiences that you've had?
For me, it's just hanging out with the guys to see them laugh. So I'm a medic. I work in a medical unit. 9 times out of 10, I sleep under a roof. I sleep in a medical closet. It's the price is right. But to me, the heroes are the guys who go to zero all the time, who rotated in and out of the trenches. If I can make them laugh, and I don't care if they're laughing at me because I'm an idiot, or if I can genuinely make them laugh. I filmed one of my least viewed YouTube videos was called Bakhmut Pizza Delivery. And it's just a 15-minute video, stopping by different medical points. Yeah, I was like, "Hey, got your pizza, motherfuckers." and they know all the time. They're like, "Motherfucker!" and to show up with pizza, and they haven't had pizza in like a month. Do you know what I mean? And say to me like, plus, plus is positive, minus is minus, and that's what I really like. Like I like doing random things, like the last KFC in the free world is in a city called Pavlograd. It's about 3 hours from the Russians, and I'll try to bring back like buckets of chicken, KFC. Like, who doesn't like that? That's what I like the most. There's one guy, he doesn't speak a word of English. It's all Russian. His name's Samurai. And he's a stone cold killer. But he's one of the nicest guys you ever want to meet in the world. And I used to do things like, Wet Willie. Like I go up behind him and Wet Willie him. And his commander speaks perfect English. And his commander would let Samurai beat the shit out of me like a teenage boy. You know what I mean? And but he'd only let it go so far. But yeah, I'm 37 on Sunday, but I'm like a teenager with some of them, and he can kick the shit out of me all he wants because he's smiling when he's doing it. Yeah, that's it. I don't care if they laugh at me or they're laughing with me, as long as they're laughing.
Happy birthday.
Well, thank you. Well, it's not till Sunday.
Okay, fair.
No, I'm going to use it. I'm going to use it as a ploy. There's a Ukraine rally which is on every Sunday here in Stockholm, and I'm going to announce it on my social media because it's still well attended. About 300-400 people come every week, and I'm one of the speakers this week. So I've already met 2 people on the streets here in Stockholm who recognized me. So I'm just hoping more people will come, and maybe they'll buy thermal scopes or night vision or generators for us. Don't let a good thing or a bad thing go to waste.
This is the end of part 1. You can follow Brandon on Instagram and YouTube at Ukraine_TBIC. Part 2 will be out sometime next week. Until then, stay safe, everyone.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.